My name is Jeremy Rowe. I'm the chairman of Bully Banks, and this is the latest of our video updates. I want to talk to you today about sophisticated customers. These are businesses that have been deemed under the financial redress scheme to be financially sophisticated. There were 3 tests to determine the level of financial sophistication, and if the business passed 2 of those tests, it was deemed to be financially sophisticated. There is a test as to the asset value of business, there is a test to the turnover of business, and there is a test to as to the number of employees of a business. Now, the particular levels are not material for the conversation. What is clear is that ordinary SMEs could pass these tests and be deemed to be financially sophisticated when clearly they were no such thing. For example, the asset tests. Businesses which had large asset values would pass that test. So, for example, a car dealer with a large number of vehicles, each of which has got a significant price, passes the asset test. A business that owns a number of pubs can have a large number of employees, many of whom are part-time, but it can pass the employee test. And clearly, successful businesses would pass the turnover test, whatever the particular skills of the individuals involved in running those businesses. The tests, or the provisions relating to the test of financial sophistication were really quite inappropriate. If you pass the test of financial sophistication, there's no appeal. You're deemed to be financially sophisticated and are excluded from the scheme. If you failed the test, in other words, according to the test you were deemed to be financially unsophisticated, the banks could rely on a subjective test and say, in practice, this business had the skills, had the expertise, had the resources to properly deal with an interest rate hedging product, and therefore they're excluded from the scheme because they are financially sophisticated in fact. So there's an appeal, if you like, in the bank's favour to exclude a business, but there's no appeal for the business to utilise if it is deemed to be sophisticated, and it clearly is not. There were nearly 30,000 interest rate hedging products mis-sold or sold by the banks. Of those, 10,500 were excluded from the scheme because of the sophistication test. There is no good reason for the majority of those FSMEs to be excluded from the scheme. The only logic for them being excluded from the scheme is to protect the banks. Of nearly 19,000 sales which are within the scheme that have been assessed by the banks, and the sale has been reviewed by the banks, of those, over 90% have been determined by the banks to have been mis-sale. With a degree of hard-headed logic, it is quite clear that something like 100% of those sales would actually have been determined to have been mis-sold if the review was independent. But still, let's run with the figure of 90% of the sales have determined to be mis-sold. When you look at the 10,500 sales that were excluded from the scheme on the grounds that the SMEs were financially sophisticated, you know that the same process was used by the bank to sell the same product. It was used by the same salesman, the same documentation was used, and in truth, the same customers were mis-sold the product. Given that over 90% of the sales within the scheme have been determined to have been mis-sold, and the banks carried out that determination. One is pretty confidently able to assert that at least 75% of the 10,500 sales are likely to have been missold as well. So we have a situation in which the FCA knows, through its experience of the scheme, it knows that the vast majority of these 10,500 sales were missold, and the banks know that those products were missold. And yet they are excluded from the FCA redress scheme. Look again at the reasons why they were excluded. They were excluded because it was deemed that they would have the skill, the resources, the expertise to be able to understand these products. In truth, the banks didn't understand the products they were selling, and personally I believe that the FCA doesn't understand the product that it's regulating. Why on earth would anyone think that a car dealer, that a large hotel owner, that the owner of a group of nursing homes, the owner of a group of pubs would have those skills? The other reason that was given was that these businesses would have the financial resources to challenge the banks in court. On its face, that is and always has been nonsense. We know through the Crestline experience that that small business is running with costs coming up to £1 million. In addition, one is talking about a business taking action against its bank that controls all of its finances, it provides its overdraft, it provides its loans, etc., etc. It is always a very, very difficult decision for a small business, an SME, to sue a bank. That is why this assumption about these businesses would have had the resources, would have had the capability to sue their bank is so wrong. We believe, as a minimum step, there has to be imposed now an appeal process for every business that has been determined to be sophisticated, so that that business can go to an independent body, and by independent I don't mean one of the big firms of accountants, a truly independent body to determine whether it was in fact financially able to understand these very, very toxic products.